You've reached FIT TV. Stick around. We'll be right back.
I've been laid up from work, my rent is due. My kids all need brand new shoes. So I went to the bank to see what they could do. They said, son, look like bad luck got a hold on you. But it's too tight to mention. I can't give an unemployment extension. But it's too tight to mention. Said, brother, I'd like to help you, but I'm unable to. So I call him my father, Father, Almighty Father.
There exists an unlevel playing field for litigant child support payers in family courts. Obligors are punished, even jailed, by unfair judges' decisions. The courts know of the injustice to child support payers, but there's no recourse. The payees happily take the money and run. The payer then fights for the justice they rarely receive, and the acrimony just continues to go on forward. It is really an evil way to do business. It is within the courts where the self-leveling exists. Off the backs of the unfair decisions by judges made by child support payers is the only way that this whole thing works. Feeding the bureaucracy is a unlevel playing field, but that's where the money is going. It's going from the litigants to the court system, which treats its litigants and its people through the system extremely unfairly. I have with me to discuss the issues about having redress or having no redress. On my left, Sean Delevan, a disabled support payer, and on his left, in the far corner there, Glenn Sabota is also. Are you disabled as well? I know
No,
you're
I'm not. No.
Support payer, though, that's under duress, that's
Yes.
for sure.
Yes, that's
okay,
correct.
you're going to assist us in helping us with that part of the program. Sean, just so people can get an idea of what's going on in your life, tell us what happened in your case. What's going on?
Basically, my experience with the child support system has been very adversarial from the very get-go. I got divorced in 2001, and I immediately, through the Child Support Enforcement Bureau and through child support rulings, I was immediately hit with a very, very high amount of child support, $420 a week as a temporary order, which eventually became permanent.
Was it based upon an income that you were able to make at that time?
No,
or?
Actually, the support magistrate based it. He imputed my income. He disregarded my joint filings, my tax returns that I filed with my wife for the past 5 years prior, and he just basically made up a number. Mm-hmm. And when I I actually tried to mediate the situation with my wife, my ex-wife at the time, because I owned a business and I knew there was no way my business could survive. And within a short period of time, I quickly fell in arrears. I quickly lost my business, and I ended up basically going bankrupt.
What was the relationship to you losing the business and the court orders for an imputed income or an excessive imputed income?
There was basically, it was impossible for me to pay off the note for my business and meet the child support obligation at the same time. And then to compound matters, I had a CDLA license, which I needed to run my business, and child support, because I fell into arrears, saw fit to suspend that license, basically ensuring that I had no way to continue with my business any further. So when I pleaded to the judge and to my ex to reconsider, that I was more or less told to find a different line of work. And I was kind of on my own. What transpired from that point was I had a series of injuries, accidents, and surgeries that left me fully disabled. And I found no sympathy or no willingness for compromise between either family court or from my
Did the
ex.
court deem that these disabilities that you entered into evidence were beyond or past the date of your divorce or the paperwork processing for the divorce? Because there's a obvious situation the court will take advantage of that.
Well, what I found mainly...
Of the timing.
What I found mainly was when I tried to bring the documentation and the medical evidence that I did have different circumstances in my health and my ability to pay. there was always an excuse between the family court official or the referee or judge that invalidated the paperwork or documents I brought forward. It always seemed that there was always something else required. And the problem with that was, in between trying to provide the right documentation, there was always a 4 to 6 month delay in the next court appearance. All that time, I'd be building further and further in arrears and further into a hole, which realistically I have no way to dig out of.
Did you have, how many kids do you have?
I have 2 boys.
You have 2 boys, okay. And how do they, how old are they, first of all?
14 and 10.
Well, they're old enough to get a view or to report or give an opinion of how things are going.
I would have to say, honestly, my experience in child support and visitation custody matters, my children's voice has rarely been either acknowledged, requested, or they really have.
What about to you personally? I mean, how are they responding to you personally? Are they on board? Do they understand that there's an injustice going on? Are they hesitant or reluctant to join you in your complaints? What exactly is going on with the family?
Well, due to the fact that I have extremely restricted access to my children, there is rarely any time where I have any unsupervised or unrestricted contact with my children. And this wasn't something that I believe that this was tailored by design to be that way. When I do have an opportunity to speak to my children, to be honest, the very last thing I want to talk about is family court,
right,
or anything that might be perceived as trying to form a wedge or anything against the mom. Because at this point, after 11 years being restricted to 1 hour a week with my children, there is nothing I would want to do to jeopardize that 1 hour.
They're at the point where they're old enough to make up their own minds if there's an injustice. Was one of the reasons why I brought that up. Children after 14 are generally allowed to make a decision on where they want to stay and where they want to live. Of course, if they're in a largely different area with a different school district, that won't be so easy. What's happening?
Well, there's been 2 occasions where my children, it seemed that they would have an opportunity to really play a pivotal role in how the case proceeded forward, and it was a very painful experience for me because I realized very quickly that it seems that there is no rule or no efforts that aren't great enough to make sure that I don't get ahead that will be engaged by my ex-wife.
Yep.
When my oldest son was set to testify before a forensic evaluation, I was really very confident that finally some of the he said, she said talk would be put to the side and my children's voice would be heard. And basically 2 weeks before the evaluation, my son was placed on heavy-duty psychotropic medications, and everything he said was more or less dismissed as being inconsistent.
Wow.
Just, if I can, I want to just back up a little bit. You know, obviously, we met Sean through Families in Transition several months ago, maybe almost about a year ago, and he was going through some traumatizing effects in the family court. And some of the issues that he was raising, that he was on disability and was still paying the high rates of child support. And obviously the courts will not help a non-custodial parent to try to give him the proper information. What was happening was Sean was paying like a non-injured person, somebody who was not on welfare or disability, and so he was paying regular standards, like as if he was capable of working a full-time employment, which is going on in this county on a regular basis and has been going on for years. So we spoke to Sean, we told him of his legal rights, and he had to go out and fight, you know, this system, and to try to say, hey, listen, you got it. There has to be a cap on my child support. I can't be paying you either $200-300 a week. I'm on disability, and it's such a process that if somebody is not there to tell these people, nobody out in that family court or the Department of Social Services will do that because they will lose income coming to the county. So Sean was trying to get visitation for his children, but he was going going to jail. They take away your driver's license. I mean, you're living like
sure,
a third.
once you're entrapped, you're a victim. You're a victim of the state.
Yes.
And the state can apply whatever measure they wish to get what they want out of you, which is probably what
unjustly
what many people that we know have done. But there's a recent change. So the good news is in the future, and we're hoping that this program will go to the source for me to help. I have a ear of somebody at the state level that might be able to help us get redress for disabilities or things that are unreasonable, because there's no change of circumstances going on here. There's a tremendous amount of change of circumstances, but nothing that the state can really handle effectively.
Well, I mean, my opinion is that this is old news. This is something we fought about in Families in Transition over 10 years ago. I mean, the judges go to school. They go to the up in White Plains. They go to the Judiciary Institute. They're taught these things. They don't want to bring these things up. You have to present it like you're on a murder trial. And I mean, I said today, some of the people in family court have more paperwork to try to defend themselves from child support or family court issues than some murder trials.
Right.
It's they already know. I believe they do know. So it's we just have to be out there to watch them.
So what do you think that the children going forward? Let's go back to the kids for just a moment. What do you think is going to happen to them going forward for you? Is there any possibility that there's no joint custody law, so you can't just step back in and say, you know what, let's have a shared parenting. Let's share this parenting going forward. I mean, has your wife changed her perspective, remarried, or what has she done?
My ex-wife is actually remarried. She has another child with her new husband, and it's very painful and difficult for me to actually say, but after 11 years and seeing the lengths that my ex and her new husband were willing to take to ensure that I never regained any of my rights, I had to make a decision to step away. Not for me, but for the safety of my children. If a person is willing to drug, intimidate, threaten, and harm a 14-year-old child just because he wants to see their father, I have to step back and say to myself, what kind of danger am I putting my son in if I continue to push forward?
Well, what kind of danger might they be in if someone's going to go to the extent of putting them in psychotropic drugs to get them to be evaluated at that time? That's another.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what risk is worse. I think not. This is not something for everyone. You're faced with a dilemma that's life-crunching. Sometimes you need to fight. And I'm not asking you to fight, because sometimes you need to withdraw. I completely get where you're at. You're in that middle of the road. The system makes you do something, doesn't it? It's going to make you either go forward or go backwards. Nothing will ever be exactly the same. I would place upon the feet of the court the unrealistic reality of judging a child under drugs, or an unfair assessment there, and try that approach and go into that with all guns blazing, because that seems to be an unreasonable expectation to come out with a normal representation of the mental health under psychotropic drugs.
I question just tremendous amount of the psychologists, the schools are doing it, trying to medicate the children. It is a new business, and I always question, psychologists that would want to give children medication, and because we've been following this so long, and it's to me it's not a good direction that we're going in this industry of controlling families.
It's the state is the other party, as we talked about. The state
they're the ones that are promoting this. The parents. They sometimes go along with it, but we need to have dad involved in these children's lives, because we're able to take care of some of the. Sometimes the other parent has psychological problems, and they pass it on to the children, but they want to keep that out of the equation. Pretty much, at least I know pretty much in New York State and mainly Suffolk County, they're just not interested in visitation enforcement. Yeah,
we should call it access, by the way. I don't use the visitation's a criminal
That's
word.
Correct. Yeah,
we're trying to get that to change.
Yeah. If I can,
sure,
taking what you said makes sense to me, and I would have to agree with that statement if you were dealing with a system that really wanted to hear logic and the truth. But my experience has been that family court will look in one direction, and they will refuse, in my case anyway, to consider any other possibility, whether it's by design, convenience, I'm not sure.
They want you to use the system. They want you to go to the appeal, the lengthy and laborious process that's unrealistic. Less than 5% of the cases are overturned. They want you to go through that appeal system. You know, spend more money on the legal aspects of it.
This state is so broke. This county is so broke. You'll hear both the Republican parties and the Democrat parties never mention cutting money from this system.
The child support system is a cash cow.
They'll cut the schools, they'll cut the police department, they'll cut the hospitals. They'll never mention, because both parties have their hands in the pocket of this family court system. That's why it's the biggest silent, kept secret. But almost everybody in your job or where you work with is going through this.
Yeah, and this is why we do what we do. I mean, this is why I'm here.
And, you know, what you said about Democrats, Republicans, if anyone was ever to take into account how much taxpayer money has been spent, in my case alone, in 11 years, it would be mind-boggling. I hear a lot of people say, well, family court really doesn't affect me. What happens over there has nothing to do with me. If people had a comprehension of how much money is being wasted, taxpayer money, for matters that could be mediated, resolved with common sense logic.
I have some newspaper articles, and some of the rule of thumb was that the counties would spend anywhere from $4.5 to $5 million to collect every $250,000 in child support. And that's why there's so many union members involved making big bucks. There's judges that have been retired for over a decade making over $300,000 a year in Suffolk County. I mean, you know, how many people are getting rich off your children in this county?
Yeah, as long as we keep falling prey to it. This is why we're hoping that if a family would recognize that if the children were more important, placing the children in a system such as the one you fell through would be a no-brainer. So the people who watch this program are getting the idea, well, you know, that would be a big mistake to have to go to a court to try to find out where my child is going to be, and that I can assure you with, and everyone should.
Have you seen some of the same-sex marriages or unities? I mean, you have. I just seen a case where it was two same-sex women, and then the one woman had been inseminated by one of the neighbors. And then the two same-sex women wanted to get divorced or separated, and then all of a sudden there's three people that are involved in visitation. So it's now you're having non-biological parents involved in visitation. So this is turning out to be probably one of the #1 losses, you know, for the taxpayers.
Yeah, paternity is one issue. No one's really presented that issue, but that's another story. We can get to that on another day. But the same-sex issue is a whole other ball of wax.
Just a mess.
Does your ex have any kind of recognition to what's going on for you? Or is it designed to bury you? I mean, did you think about just her representation in this matter?
My personal belief is, because there's almost, I was speaking before the show, it's almost like my ex has a cocoon around her, between people, whether it's friends, family, lawyers, where she's been told it's okay to do what she's doing, where it's acceptable to behave the way she's behaving. I don't think there's any consideration or even acknowledgement of what this process is doing to me, to my children, or even to her own personal well-being. Because there can't be anything healthy, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, when you know you're causing pain to another individual.
Unless there's and I don't understand that, to have that much vindictiveness to somebody, to create some more pain. I, for instance, was in a similar situation. You had an imputed income issue. When, after my child was 12 years old, he decided to live with me. It became too much of a problem for her, so he came to live with me. And I remarried, and my wife was very, very upset that I didn't do the same thing to her that she did to me. She put me through the ringer and had me go through all kinds of hoops and barrels, and I had to deplete my retirement account and reduce myself to nothing also. But in that process, I decided, you know, someplace the buck has to stop somewhere. It was a choice I made, kind of like your retraction from the system, if you think about it. It's another decision that walks back and says, I'm the better man for it. Right? I mean, you have to leave yourself that vision of your children looking at you as the better man is fine. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
There's nothing more that I would like in life than for my ex-wife to be happy, her new husband to be happy, for us all to get along. There's no reason for anyone to try to hurt anybody. Whether or not that makes me the better man, or I don't even think like that. I know for myself the emotional burden that this caused on me, and we spoke about suicides and fathers losing hope. Where this process took me in my life, I'm very, very fortunate to be sitting here today, even able to have a conversation. So I don't want to sell my soul to try to win or prove anybody right.
That was a choice you're making, and it's a reasonable choice to make. It's a sound way to decide. You know, just in your situation, how long have you been dealing with? I'm going to show you an example in a second. How long have you been dealing with your family court issues?
Well, probably about 15 years.
By 15 years, and you're in it for 10.
11 years.
11 years. I was in it for about 8 or 10 years myself. Yeah. I mean, the public, John Q. public out there looking at this program, may look at us as extraordinary. If I just use the years aspect alone, it's a little extraordinary. 10 years. That's more than a little extraordinary. That's a removal of your soul for that many years. You're a changed person forever.
Yeah.
The system doesn't really deal with this in a transitional state. That's why we're families in transition. We look at this thing from an institution change. We see this picture and this pattern going on, that we now see the disjointed elements in children going forward. We now can see the psychological deprivations created by